First it was Nessa, now it's Bea. Pretty sure there's a lot we can learn from this outrage. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. A while back, I made a video talking about Nessa when she was first introduced. In it, I defended her design against those who deemed her outfit inappropriate and would edit her to be wearing more clothes with the condescending attitude that they fixed her design. Thankfully since then, Nessa's gorgeous design has become a non-issue, as fans the world over flooded the internet with immaculate fan art. Basically everyone loved her, and complaints were drowned out entirely. Turns out, the real issue with Nessa had yet to emerge. Yes, the main problem with Nessa comes from the controversy of whitewashing. This is relatively old news, so I'll be brief in summarizing what went down. Basically, among all the fan art being made of Nessa, one artist put out a picture that used a more pastel, washed-out color palette. Someone on Twitter interpreted this art as whitewashing, and responded by darkening Nessa's skin and reposting the image in order to shame the original artist. Again, the issue isn't so much that any one artist wanted to share their own fresh perspective on the character, but rather how one user argued the original was wrong and needed fixing when the artist never asked for that kind of feedback. Reasonably, the artist responded back by saying, "Hey, don't go changing and posting my art without permission." But the Twitter user continued to disrespect them. This started a bit of a war to defend artist integrity. Other artists began legitimately making Nessa white in their artwork to send a message that they can draw whatever they want. To me, artists were stating that color palettes are cosmetic. If you want default Nessa, go for it. Want a darker Nessa? Here you go. How about a purple Nessa? No problem. Why should white be any different? Hell, if you don't want to see Nessa's fine midriff, here's a version where she's in old-school diving gear. To the artists, it wasn't racial. They were just stating they could make a version of Nessa for each person's preference, while still respecting the original design. Certainly, amidst this Twitter war, some genuine bad apples showed their true colors, such as the person who made this outrageously racist drawing of Nessa as an ape. When Sword and Shield finally came out, someone made a white Nessa mod, which many have accused of being a racist troll. As awful as it is, I still see it and raise the question, when did this even become a matter of race? To be fair, there aren't that many black anime characters, so when a likable one comes around, it's a cause for celebration, not because anime needs to fulfill a diversity quota or pander to anyone in particular, but because the design makes people happy. Obviously, people are allowed to cosplay characters of any race they please, but it's certainly nice when your own skin actually matches that of the character. There are black cosplayers who are shunned or discriminated against for trying to cosplay a white or Asian character. Similarly, we've got some jerks out there hating on a naturally tan Asian woman for cosplaying a black character. But that begs the question, is Nessa even black? I referred to her as dark-skinned during my first video, and some people commented that I should just say she's black. If we're talking color, then yeah, she's black. But if we're talking about black being a race of African descent or something, we can't necessarily attribute that to her. For instance, what race do anime characters actually look like? The majority are often Asian, because most anime takes place in Japan, but there are many cases where European or American characters interact with Japanese ones with little to no visual distinction. Azure Lane, for instance, features anthropomorphized warship girls from various countries, such as the United States, Germany, and Japan. While the Japanese ships certainly dress in traditional Japanese clothes, their bodies, faces, and colors are no different from, say, Enterprise. They all have the same art style. Anime can get away with this, but live action usually can't. People have debated whether anime characters look more Caucasian or Japanese due to their large eyes. Some people think white folks make for more accurate cosplays. This is why Japan actually liked Scarlett Johansson as Motoko Kusanagi in the live-action Ghost in the Shell, that she looks like an anime character. In contrast, it's jarring to see Asians playing characters who we know are supposed to be canonically European, such as in Fullmetal Alchemist and Attack on Titan. Going back to drawn anime, only in rare occasions do we see one race contrasted with another visually. There's the part in Free where Haru visits Rin in Australia, and all the Australians are drawn more realistically. Same goes for Leskinen from Steins Gate Zero. In these cases, the Japanese are chosen to have the default anime style, while the other races get caricatured or exaggerated to stand out. The opposite happens in the film Vexil, in which the American lead is remarkably more anime-looking than the story's Japanese citizens. Pokemon could have done the same thing with Nessa, depicting her with more noticeable, albeit exaggerated anatomical features, like those seen in the characters from Carol and Tuesday. Because they didn't, however, her racial identity is at the whim of the writers. While the Pokemon world is loosely modeled after our own, with regions standing in for real-life countries, Nessa and most of the characters in Pokemon don't appear to have a specific race or culture to define them. Nessa's no different than anyone else, and that's exactly how I think it should be. In that regard, the color of her skin doesn't indicate anything about her, and for all intents and purposes, she may as well be any color of the rainbow. And yet, the idea of cosmetic skin color is controversial in reality. In a utopian society, color may not matter, but racism still very much exists. On one end, it exists as cultural stereotypes and prejudice, making different races judge, fear, and discriminate against each other. On the other, it exists as races banding together as groups, each forming their own unique cultures. Thus, in practice, the color of your skin does matter. Others will treat you differently because of it, and your family will likely raise you to have some sense of pride in your heritage. As such, the idea of borrowing someone's skin for a day or so, such as blackface, is unfair, because it allows a more privileged race the chance to benefit from an oppressed race's culture, without having to suffer the long-term consequences of actually being that race. Sadly, the ideal solution to this problem isn't always clear. Some claim we should just stop seeing race altogether, but that's almost impossible because there are indeed certain identifying features, such as culture, that are racially fostered. In its own way, even taking pride in your own heritage means perpetuating a racial divide, to an extent. Anime and games, on the other hand, provide us at times with completely fictional worlds that are free from the racial climate of our real world. Racism is something the creators can integrate or not, kinda like how Valkyria Chronicles presented racism in the form of hating on the Darksons, otherwise white people with dark blue hair. Pretty much every video game I've seen with custom character creation lets you choose from a variety of skin tones without affecting the game one bit, some going as far as to let you use any color available on the RGB spectrum. While we as viewers or players have our own understanding of race, that doesn't mean the characters in that fictional universe do, and that's a breath of fresh air. So, while Nessa is canonically dark-skinned with no other racial identifiers, it's great that people can identify with or idolize her. In a way, she is very much a representation of groups that don't often get shown in anime. At the same time, however, I see no inherent problem with there being a white Nessa. It's not as though she's canon, and I see it no differently than a white woman cosplaying her. Not everyone is trying to associate real-world racism with their escapist fantasies. In the end, it's just another case of let fiction be fiction. Of course, there will always be racist people who utilize these controversies to attack and be harmful. But white Nessa wasn't born from racism, but rather an artist's advocacy for creative freedom. Now, the easier case is Bea, or Bea if we go by the dub. That's odd. Long story short, Bea is not being whitewashed. Anyone who thinks so is either ignoring or doesn't understand how lighting works. This episode shows us Bea in a variety of environments, from brightly lit landscapes to sandy deserts and majestic caverns. Accordingly, her skin's hue and brightness change depending on the color temperature of the area and the intensity of the light. It shouldn't be news, but truly acclaimed anime often try to replicate the visuals we might see in live-action film, emulating how an actual camera sees the world. It lends a cinematic quality and vibrant authenticity to the visuals. To achieve this effect, sometimes it means purposefully manufacturing the flaws and defects of a camera. Lens flares are a great example, exposure is another. You see, whether you're talking about film or digital, cameras often have a limited capacity to see ranges of light. Heck, even our own eyes, which are much more versatile, have this limitation. If you spend all day inside in a darkly lit room, going outside on a snowy and sunny day might be too bright for your eyes to handle. All that snow is just a sea of white, and you can't see the detail in its texture or shadows. Only after you wait a while and your eyes adjust can you make out those details. This is because your eyes are stopping down, closing themselves so less light penetrates your retinas. Then let's say you go back inside after a while. It'll be so dark you might just run into a wall. To adjust, your eyes need to stop up and let in more light. In cameras, this is called exposure. It exists because neither our eyes nor cameras can see detail in the brightest and darkest parts of our vision at the same time. Turns out, Pokemon is replicating that with their animation. Towards the end, Bea comes out of a dark cave and sees a big, bright waterfall. It should look kinda odd. The waterfall is just a big hunk of white, masking the flow. Same goes for the rocks and other bright parts of the frame. The shot is overexposed on purpose. It has an emotive quality, and one of the effects of overexposure is seeing colors fall off into white. This happens to all colors, not just Bea's skin. Look at this ride-on, before stepping out into the light, and after it's basking in the sun's rays. Same thing happens. Even when looking at Bea in this light, we can see that, further from the light source, her skin tone matches much more closely to her official art, proving that it's a lighting effect and not some racist agenda. Turns out you can pull this off with real people too. Take any black person and ramp up the exposure, either in camera or through digital effects. That skin will brighten up before your eyes. Even if this was just a pathetic attempt by Kotaku to gain attention, it gives me a chance to brag about how visually stunning anime can look. Overall, Bea is not being whitewashed to retcon her appealing darker skin, but rather placed into an overexposed environment for dramatic effect. There's absolutely no motivation for Nintendo to take a popular and beloved character and retract the qualities people like about them. To finish this off, I want to point out that race bending can go both ways. We're seeing a lot of conventionally white characters being played by black or mixed race actors, perhaps the most topical being The Little Mermaid. The only major difference, of course, is that white people aren't a minority. Presumably, we don't need any more representation. Personally, I think it's hypocritical to condemn a white Nessa while supporting a black Ariel. Either you condemn both or embrace both. If you think it's okay to take an established character and creatively show them from another racial perspective, then that's exactly what a white Nessa stands for. Clearly, this is a complicated issue. I'm not gonna act like I have all the answers. Let's take this to the comments, and please respect each other's opinions. Thanks for watching! If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and most of all, smashing that notification bell as if it were your waifu. That way you'll never miss out on all of my anime content, lore videos, live streams, and Holy Waifu Wars polls. My vids are struggling to get featured, so that bell is absolutely critical. If you want to support me directly, check out my Patreon, or consider donating via Super Chat. And as always, celebrate your fandom.